Oh yeah, DJ Nation fam, what is up? What is happening? We have made it. It's postseason ball on tap for you, and it's the DJ Nation podcast here to break it down for you. Powered by the Fantasy Authority. What is up? What is happening? We are breaking down the wild card round, the wildest weekend, as they usually call it. The NFL not very unique in that standpoint, using the same terminology year in and year out. But nothing, no slander on that, because when we're looking at the slate that we have, boys, this 6-gamer for Saturday through Monday now, as they just take over the whole weekend and add in a Monday night football game, just so you guys remember that football is king, and we'll take over that weekend, even though it's not a holiday weekend. That's the next week. But we got a fun slate, and we're excited to break it down with the people. Shout out to everybody who's watching in live here. We appreciate everybody who's listening back on this. It's going to be a fun one to break down. I'm happy to do so with the boys. Welcoming in Matty D at Matty DFS is where you can find him on Twitter. You know him. It's Matty2v2. Matty gets buckets, and he's going to bring the heat this week. I know he is, for the wild card slate. And then the Godfather himself, he might cool it down a little bit. That's Kevin Steele at Fantasy Red 13. Ice cold. He gets to sit back and relax. His Chiefs aren't playing. He's just in it for the thrill. You know what I'm saying? He's just trying to watch these games and just see who the Chiefs have to beat to be able to get that lauded three-peat that they've been gunning for. So this will be a fun one, though. Before we get to that action, we got to break down Wildcard Weekend, boys, and it's a 6-gamer. Maddie, welcome you in. How you feeling about this slate, man?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think there's a lot of games of the 6 games. Probably the majority of them project more to be low scoring, which feels kind of weird, but I do think there's some exciting ones, like Commanders Bucks is probably what I think will be the best game of the weekend, personally, which might be a hot take given we've got Minnesota and the Rams, and the first game is Chargers Texans, which Chargers Texans has the weirdest, I think, total of the weekend. It's sitting at a 41, and I would think that game easily goes over that total.
Yeah, that's a weird one, and we're going to be breaking the slate down for the purposes of the full weekend slate of games, the full onslaught of games. But definitely we'll tap into some of these mini slates that we're going to be having, as we got a fun mini slate on tap. And yeah, the Saturday one, I mean, I'll just say it right now, like I already told Kev pre-show, I'm pretty sure Houston's going to Arrowhead. I really don't understand it. Well, I understand it. Like, Houston's been bad, right? They've been terrible, and nobody trusts in them. But like, we for DFS purposes, we talk about this all the time. Like, what's more nice than a concentrated offense, right? Like, we know where the ball is going from CJ Stroud. That's fantastic. This is still a home game for them, and this was like the darling that everybody wanted to target, like in the summer. Everybody was talking about the Texans. CJ Stroud had this great rookie year, and it's been a rough season for them. Like, injuries have haunted this team all season long, but yet they still find themselves in the playoffs. They still find themselves hosting a home game. And if there's any, like, I get the Harbaugh narrative, I do, and I understand that, but like, it's still the Chargers, right? Like, we got a whole Chargers history of disappointments to back on that, and like, all of a sudden Harbaugh is going to come in and they should be favored on the road. I don't know, man. It's a tough one to get behind, but I hear you, Matty. Like, I'm in on that game being over, and it's a fun one to attack for the Saturday only slate. Kev, welcome on in here. Talk to the people, man. What are you excited about this slate? We're going to break it down position by position, but this is a fun wild card slate to get behind because of so many games and so much action. Like, we can do showdowns, we can do mini slates, we can do the full slate. How you feeling about this slate coming up on tomorrow? I mean, we're going to be the games kick off tomorrow as we're recording on Friday.
Yeah, I think there's some obvious games that we want to attack. I mean, just looking at totals, I mean, we have the 3 games, the Bucks Washington games, 50.5 point total. The Buffalo Denver games 47.5, and the Rams Minnesota games 47.5 as well. Those are like the 3 top games in terms of points. I think there's certain games that I just don't really have much interest in. Like, I don't really have much interest in, and maybe it's not the right move, but like the Ravens game, like the Ravens-Steelers game, just feels like a game where I know, previously we saw the Ravens put up a lot of points against this team, but I will say, just historically, this game has been much more of a low scoring type of game, like I don't have as much interest. I think there's better plays than Lamar Jackson on the slate, especially just considering price involved at 8K. Like I think there's better quarterback plays. So like I think it's just kind of trying to find the best game environments to get to. And like honestly, like I really kind of like this Buffalo and Denver get a spot here. I mean, we've seen this Denver offense, especially Bo Nix, play really well this year. I mean, he's been one of the best, not just rookie quarterbacks, but best quarterbacks in the league. And I mean, he's shown a ceiling comparable to some of these other quarterbacks. So, like, and we've seen this Buffalo defense really, really struggle, recently. And so, like, I think that is a good game to target. Where I think right now, I think the Bills are like 8.5-point favorites. So I don't think a lot of people are going to be getting to the Denver side of that game. And I think there's some sneaky upside there.
Yeah, no, I think that I've been listening to a couple things around the industry leading up to this week, and I do think that will be it will be sneaky for sure. But I think an interesting merit about the slate is that we're going to have. We're going to have this game on Saturday. Then you get the Saturday night game. Then you get the Sunday morning game. Then you get the afternoon. Like, because there's so many island games, so to speak, leading into each other, we'll have so many people, going to late swap or whatever. And I really think that, like, when you're looking at lineups and thinking about, okay, what can you do with that Buffalo and Denver game, like, it's really going to be enticing to some people to build around, because I do think that Josh Allen, for all intents and purposes, comes in as one of the highest owned, probably not only quarterbacks, but pieces on the slate. I mean, he's just done it so many times to be able to put a slate out of reach, right, so to speak. And people don't want to, shy away from that, especially, going against the Broncos at home, and, how high of favorites they are in that matchup. But it is, Bo Nix, I agree with you, Kev. Like, he's been so good down the stretch. Sean Payton's talked about it all week. Like, they have all the confidence in the world in this kid, and he's got some good pieces to be able to target from a DFS standpoint that aren't really all expensive either. So that'll be a fun game to get behind as well. But let's start it off, guys, and shout out to everybody who's coming into the chat. Again, it's the DJ Nation podcast. You know how we always do. We break it down position by position for you guys, and we are talking about it mainly from the 6-game standpoint. But if you guys have any questions about, Saturday slate or showdown, please get them in, and we'll be sure to hit on those. But, we'll start it off at the top here with the quarterback position. And when we're talking about this 6-game slate, like, yeah, you're going to have to make some tough decisions here. All of these teams, like, are in good spots. I think you can really talk about, any one of these quarterbacks and make kind of a narrative on how you think it could go. Obviously, some are going to look better than others, but these are playoff teams for a reason. And so definitely love these matchups kind of across the board. Like I said, I think Josh Allen will probably be I think he'll be the most popular quarterback. Maybe things are shaping up differently, and maybe you see things differently, Maddie, but I think Josh Allen is going to be a guy to get to. Bo Nix in that same game definitely has some interest, again, with the stacking pieces. I do think, though, that, like, this Buccaneers and Washington game is going to be, like, bananas. And so, like, to not have Baker, to not have Jaden, and Jaden's kind of like, I don't want to put him in the same category of Josh Allen, like, from an output standpoint, but just when you're talking about the pieces, like, to stack him with, like, Zacchaeus has come on strong. Ertz is he's been a solid option, and definitely love that from a tight end position, as we don't have, too many marquee tight ends on this slate to be able to choose from. So, the stacking partners do get kind of interesting for him. Austin Eckler is going to be out, or going to be back this week, I should say, excuse me. And, like, the main stacking partner there with, Terry McLaurin, like, we've seen what his floor can be in some games. Obviously, he does have a ceiling, but he spreads it around so much that it kind of gets tough. But then you got Baker on the other side. He's getting Cade Otton back. He's got Mike Evans. McMillan's been coming on strong. He's throwing passes to Bucky. Rachaad White's basically out of the picture since his fumble a couple of weeks ago. Like, Baker's stacking options look so pristine. And then we have a Saturday slate that kind of kicks it off, Maddie, as I taught. Well, the Monday slate's going to be really interesting as well, too, when you got Matthew Stafford and Sam Darnold there. Like, I'll probably be doing, like, some five entry teams, probably maybe even dabble on 20 max just because of the state of the slate and what we're talking about with Sunday being able to late swap is going to be so important. I might try and dabble and get some of that game, but like the Saturday slate of games is really kind of like the interesting one because like the game you talked about it, the total is low in the first game, and then Kev kind of hit on it, like Lamar's playoff history like is not going to rear itself, I think, in ownership. And not only his playoff history, but his history against Pittsburgh, who was kind of banged up. This is the third time these teams are facing each other. Secondary was kind of healthy. They had a game that they played the Pittsburgh without George Pickens. Lamar struggled, in the playoffs time and time again. Like, it's a road matchup for this team. Mike Tomlin, as an underdog, like, we know he can get these guys to show out. So it's like that the Saturday slate is really not that great. But like we always talk about it, like you could be looking at your lineups and like, is it going to be a week where we want to see PMR, or is it going to be a week where we're like, we don't want to miss out on these plays? So I don't know what's standing out to you, Maddie, but kind of talk to the people about where your quarterback leans are for this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it. Probably my favorite stack of the week is Jaden Daniels with the two pieces you mentioned, and that's Zaccheaus and Ertz. I mean, we've seen McLaurin, put up big games, but we've also seen him put up duds. And over the last couple of weeks, it's really been Zaccheaus and Ertz that have been the go-to guys for Daniels, and part of that's because the defenses are just keying on McLaurin. But to your point, Jaden Daniels I don't think he's got the mega ceiling that Allen has, the 50 bomb, but he can definitely get you to 40. I mean, even in week 1, his first NFL game ever, he had 16 carries for 88 yards against this same defense and 2 rushing touchdowns and got 28 DK points. His first game ever. So, now that he's had a whole season under him, we've seen several 30-point games out of Daniels. He's a $700 discount off of Josh Allen, and every dollar matters on this slate because there is like no value across the board outside of maybe a couple guys at tight end that are sub 4K. But I mean, you can't really talk me into many receivers that are sub 4K. There's no good running backs that project for 20 points that are not priced up. Sure, you can take shots on like guys like Eckler or Justice Hill or Jalen Warren if those teams are trailing, but I mean, those guys don't have massive ceilings either. So, I want to pay up for all the big receivers like Puka and Nico and, guys like that. And so, I kind of got to find cheap pieces around them. And the cheapest stack is Washington for a game that projects as the highest scoring, game of the week. Zaccheaus and Ertz, aren't even leading their positions at ownership. So it's a good way to be different. It's a good way to be cheap, but still getting exposure to one of the best fantasy scoring quarterbacks on the slate. And Jaden Daniels has just been a good quarterback overall this year outside of fantasy too. So I really like that game personally, Washington and Tampa. You can play Baker as well on the other side. I personally just like Bucky Irving myself. And, if I'm playing Baker, I almost feel like I have to play Evans. And, there's always that risk when he plays Lattimore that Evans could just get ejected because they like to fight. So, I probably just side with the Washington side and just think that, Bucky's been so good running the ball and he's involved in the pass game that, even when he doesn't score touchdowns, he's still getting 20 plus DK points. And he's just a smash every week now that he's taken over the full role. I mean, I don't even know if White touched the ball last week. So, that game is probably my favorite of the week. I mentioned it to start the show and I'll reiterate it here, but I like that game a ton. And I don't see myself going to any of the other QBs. If you were going to make me pick somebody else, it would just probably be Josh Allen. Again, I don't know how you get to him because I think you need the expensive receivers and running backs, but Allen is by far, the best overall play on the slate. Denver's defense has been horrid on the road and against like normal competition. You look at their schedule. Their schedule's been dog water the first, 10 games they played this year. And then, they play Jameis at home and, he puts up 30 and then they played, I don't who the other two teams they played recently. I think it was Baltimore and Cincinnati. And they gave up, 30 plus points to those teams too. And so, the defense, sure, Denver's been good, but a part of that's been the schedule they played and the lack of competent offenses. And now they're on the road in Buffalo for a playoff game. a place is going to be rowdy. So I think Josh Allen smashes personally. I just don't know that I have the salary to get to him. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough, Maddie. And you know, shout out to first before I get to your point, Maddie. Shout out to GZDR4F coming into the chat on Discord, asking about Mike Tomlin if he's on the hot seat if he loses this game. Yeah, Mike Tomlin's had a rough playoff record. I believe he's got like a 44 win percentage, if I'm not mistaken. You know, the weird thing about the Steelers though is their coaching history. Like, I mean, they've had 3 coaches since 1969. You know, like this is not a team that moves on from these guys very easily. He's been the head coach since 2007, and obviously a lot of his success early on in his coaching career, a lot of it predicated on Ben Roethlisberger. But they've had such a, you know, they've had such a weird revolving door with the quarterback situation. They haven't really been able to figure out since Roethlisberger. I think that kind of, you know, gives them a pass. Obviously, what he's been able to do, like from a coaching standpoint and overachieving, I feel like with the, you know, with the lack of talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball, the defense always shows out. So it's kind of tough to see that. And I don't think they would do it in a matter of firing because it's kind of out of the MO of the Rooneys. But, you know, I think like what's interesting is like there's been a lot of talk about, you know, trading for McVay, trading for, you know, Kevin O'Connell and the likes of that. Like those kind of seem far gone conclusions to me. But like trading for Mike Tomlin, like, I don't know, there might be a narrative out there where like, you know, the Steelers move on from Mike Tomlin, but they do so like in a positive way that kind of like is best interest for Mike Tomlin, right? To kind of find something new if things go awry. But like the Steelers, you know, they get to play the Ravens again. This is the 3rd time these teams are playing. Like they played the Ravens, you know, pretty tough in the history. I know some things are a little bit different this year, but you know, yeah, if they lose this game, like maybe there's some talk about that. There's always chatter, I feel like, every year about Tomlin, and then, you know, his regular season record's been absolutely phenomenal, so it might save him. But shout out to GZDR4F coming in the chat. Appreciate that. Maddie, to talk about your question or your answer there with Josh Allen, like, yeah, you talked about the slate's devoid of really good value. And this is a slate where, like, you know, I think the biggest thing, and we try to do a good job about it. We've been talking to the people for, you know, 19 weeks now in a row. We've been talking to them a long time before that. And, you know, I think the main thing that we hit on, and sometimes we forget about this too, is like on a slate like this, especially, like you're just wanting to get the game environment right of the week. So
correct.
like,
and that's where the value is going to come from.
Right. And that's where
the value always, because the studs always hit no matter whether it's low scoring or high scoring. Right. Like they, in a 13-10 game, right? Like Justin Jefferson's still going to catch, you know, 8 balls for 90 yards. He might not score, but, you know, he's still going to get you that 17 points. But it's when the guys that are 3,300 get you 17 points, when it's, you know, 31-28 or 35-32 or whatever, you know, that's where the environments come from for the cheaper scores. So I agree. Getting the game environment right is going to be a key for figuring out which value is the best value this week. And that's why I like Washington, because I just like that game. And those pieces are cheap.
Yeah, the pieces are cheap, right? And like we get Austin Eckler back. Like, he takes up a running back spot or potentially a flex spot, I guess, if you're playing from that manner of late swapping and get onto him. But like, you know, he's cheap, and we know he's a pass catching option, and we've kind of seen like. He had a game there like not too long ago, or, you know, it is long ago because we're at week 19 now, but there was a game where he just was getting peppered with targets by Jaden Daniels, like when, you know, Terry McLaurin was being covered, or maybe there was some guys missing, I want to say, and we know that's like part of his MO and upside, so he definitely has some paths and probably going to go under the radar. But like if we think that game goes over their total, if this game gets anywhere near 60 points, like you want 4 or 5 pieces from this game, and it doesn't matter like who the guys are, like in name, you know, in name value, like it just matters that like your guy goes out there and they score a touchdown. So like from your example of like playing Josh Allen, the way to play Josh Allen, I think, and to create some value is like, all right, so like, can Matt Collins get there? Like we've seen it before. Like they you know, have a decent rapport with each other. Josh Allen's always hyping up that guy, and like people want to play. You know, you don't want to trust Amari Cooper. Like Khalil Shakir is going to be one of the most popular plays, one-off or stacked options, and then Keon Coleman's the red zone target guy. But like, in an offense like this, where the ball just goes wherever it finds the open man, yeah, I can play Mac Hollins at, whatever his price tag is, under 4K. And now I've opened up some value to get some of these other, surefire guys in, some of these other studs in. But I'm banking on that game environment. So it does become an interesting way when you're talking, especially from the quarterback position, like building out this slate in a matter of like, don't try and get pieces from every game. Don't try and get I can't miss out on Nico on Saturday. I can't miss out on Puka and the late night hammer. I got to find these guys. If those guys fit into your lineups, like, great. But an overall arching story is like, you want to be able to say that, like, you were on the game environment that popped off, and you had these guys that people weren't getting to potentially in their lineups to be able to game stack appropriately. Kev, I'm gonna welcome you in here and talk about the quarterback position and kind of where you're going. You're chilling right now, like your team's not on the slate, so you get to come in this with what is it, clear eyes and an open heart type of thing, and just be able to get the slate is your oyster. Kev, what are you doing this weekend?
Clear eyes, full heart, can't
lose.
So, like, I completely agree with you, Jaden Daniels. If you just look at him in his 11 healthy games this year, in the games that he wasn't injured, and excluding the Week 18 where he got pulled out, he's averaging 26.2 fantasy points per game, which would make him the #1 scoring quarterback on this slate. He also ranked 4th in fantasy points per dropback, his 73.8% completion percentage, ranked just behind Joe Burrow this year. He's also, since Week 11, he's rushed for 60 or more yards in 4 of the 5 healthy games. And so, on the season, he's averaging 8.7 carries, 52.4 rushing yards, and he's 3rd most rushing touchdowns. The Bucs defense has been terrible this year. We know that, against opposing passers. The Bucs have yielded the 3rd most fantasy points per game and is the league's biggest pass funnel as well. So I just think this game sets up really well for Jaden Daniels. I agree with you. I think the stacking partners are pretty clear for the most part, with Sakia stepping up, Zach Ertz. I think you can play McLaurin. I mean, he is a little bit more boom or bust. He could end up definitely being a player that you had to have on this slate, but he could also be a player that completely burns you as well. But, I love Jaden Daniels. I think Baker Mayfield on the other side of that one is also, I mean, he's exceeded 29 DK points 6 times this year, and which is tied with Lamar Jackson. This is also the best game environment, 15.5 point total. The Commanders are a blitz-heavy defense, and Baker has excelled against the blitz, averaging the most fantasy points per dropback against the blitz this season. So I am a little more concerned, though, just because of, like, if they are able to put the clamps on Mike Evans, like, how does that affect things a little bit? But for the most part, I still think Baker is really good. But I already talked about Bo Nix. Bo Nix is a great play as well. I mean, the Buffalo defense has really struggled. Bo Nix, like we saw earlier in the year for the first 8 weeks, like he was averaging almost 6 carries per game. That really almost fell off a cliff over the second half of the season, where he was only running twice a game. But once we get to the playoffs, we kind of see where teams are allow these guys to kind of be unleashed. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see Bo Nix run the ball a lot more. So for me, and again, if you're looking at just like, it's a very clear path. I mean, you play with Cortland Sutton, playing with Marvin Mims, and I think you roll from there if you want to play Bo Nix. But I think one that's flying under the radar a little bit would be Justin Herbert. When you look at Herbert's season-long numbers, you're going to be pretty underwhelmed. But since Week 11, the Chargers actually ranked 8th in passer rate over expectation, as well as over that span. He is averaging over 20 fantasy points per game. He has scored 23 or more fantasy points in 4 of his last 7 games. And over his final 3 games, he has scored 23, 24, and 28 DK points. The Texans have certainly struggled at times against the pass, and they have allowed the 3rd most passing touchdowns this year. And Justin Herbert is somebody we've seen, where they've kind of been okay with unleashing and letting him run the ball. So I think there's a path here for Justin Herbert as well. And again, pretty easy kind of stacking with you, whether you want to go with McConkey. Mm-hmm. I think Quentin Johnston's in play. I mean, that was wild last week. He saw like 14 targets in that game. He's good to go there in that game. So I just, the Chargers really haven't been able to run the ball with a whole lot of effectiveness. And I think the one thing about this slate, when I've been looking at it, when it comes to the running back position, I am not really excited about any running back play. I think outside of Bucky Irving, and that's it. Like, right. Yes, Saquon Barkley can smash and break this slate, but it's not like it's probably the 2nd best matchup on the slate. But still, the Packers have been a decent run defense this year. You go and look at, but everybody else, like all of these teams are really, really strong run defenses, and so like there's not this standout play at running back, where okay, these guys could absolutely are going to smash. Like certainly that upside is there for these guys, but like Josh Jacobs, for example, like Philadelphia has been one of the best run defenses in the league this year. Like I don't feel great about playing him. Like I guess you just have to bank off volume. And so like when it comes to this, I think the passing game is going to be where I really want to attack. And I think there are some places that you can pay down at the running back position. I think there's still some value to a wide receiver without Zay Flowers on this slate. That really opens the door, I think, for not just Nelson Aguilar, but also Isaiah Likely. Once Flowers left last week, Likely ran like 60% of the routes. So I think that kind of opens up some value there with those guys with Zay Flowers missing in this game. But and then I also think, the interesting one that nobody's really mentioned, I haven't really anybody talk about him, is Deontay Johnson, who's $3,500, stepping into this situation. Like, I don't know what he's going to do. He played last week. He saw 4 targets, but that was pretty much a lot of the backups play because I think the starters only played one series, and then they pulled everybody out. But Deontay Johnson could be like an interesting spot for value at $3,500. I mean, they have nobody else to throw the ball to outside of Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz. And so with Tank Dell going down, because the other pass catchers they have are garbage. So, like, I think that's an interesting play for value. But overall, for quarterback, like, I love Jaden Daniels. Like, and the game that we really haven't talked about, though, I think is the Vikings and Rams game. But it kind of worries me a little bit. Like, I think I'd rather just get pieces of that game than, like, full-on game stacking. Because even, like, Sam Darnold, for example, like, he only has one game this year where he scored over 29 DK points. Like, he doesn't necessarily have the type of, like, ceiling that I think he's going to kill you, unless these other games just absolutely bomb. And the same thing with like Matt Stafford. Like, I think they could get there, but like, I think the chances of it are less likely. And so, like, even with that game, like, I'm not excited about to get to those pieces. Like, for me, I really would either just play Jaden Daniels. I want to play, or like I said, play Baker Mayfield in that same game, or, like Bo Nix or Justin Herbert, something like that. Like, even Josh Allen, like, because like if they destroy, and they're 8.5, 9-point favorites, if they destroy them, like I don't know if we're going to see this Superman game from Josh Allen that we typically want to see for him to really break the slate. And so if that happens, then at his cost, I think is the problem, because he's so expensive. I mean, he's $8,200. Lamar Jackson's $8K. Like, I think there's cheaper quarterbacks on this slate that I would just rather pay down at the position and not pay up for Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen is the one that I think I'm going to have a hard time with, because I really do want to try and build with him. It makes it so tough if you don't really go, super value pieces to get him. But again, like we've seen this time and time again, this guy goes in and rushes for 2, and then he all of a sudden throws for 1 or 2, and you're just sitting there like, well, shit. I mean, Josh Allen has 35, 40 points. Like, where am I going to get that from? This does make for an interesting slate, though, Kev, as you talk about that Minnesota and Rams game. Like, when I was first building out, Matthew Stafford's so cheap, Sam Darnold, he's pretty cheap as well too. But we have a great quarterback slate from a rushing standpoint. I mean, when you look at the yards per game that some of these guys are putting at, you got Bo Nix, who rushes like 60 yards a game. We know what Lamar Jackson does. Like, he goes out there, he's going to be running. He's actually been contained against Pittsburgh, but still in this profile, right? Josh Allen, same thing. Jalen Hurts, he can rush in touchdowns. But Bo Nix, I mentioned, and then Herbert's actually been running a little bit, and then obviously Jaden Daniels too. Like, this is a great slate to be getting these rushing quarterbacks, because if they're not getting to the scoring necessarily from the air, like they're able to make up with it so much with their legs that it makes it hard to take some of these pocket passers, unless that game environment just goes off. But I do agree. Like, I'm probably going to look to get some mini stacks of that Minnesota and Rams game, because there obviously is pieces that stand off the page. But the defenses, though, in that game, Kev, like Minnesota and the Rams, they've both been playing pretty well. I mean, people think about the Minnesota game against Detroit, but Detroit's been doing that to damn near everybody. So I'm not going to think about that. But like, the Rams defense has been coming on strong as of late, and these two teams played earlier this year as well too. The Rams were able to shock everybody in a season when they were struggling earlier on and beat this team already. So it'll be an interesting, standpoint of, Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores versus Sean McVay and whoever the defensive coordinator who's been showing out for the Rams is.
It's also in Arizona. I mean, it's not even
right, and not even a home game. No, great point, Kev. So yeah, that's one, and obviously, like, it's the last game of the slate, right? So it's like honestly, I'll just say this: like, I want to get to Justin Jefferson and Puka Nacua a skinny on the team, because those are the two guys where, like, they can go out and go get 20 easily without scoring a touchdown. And if somehow the touchdowns like go through them, like, even if I don't have Sam Darnold or Matt Stafford, if those are the guys who are putting up the points, like, you could be chilling with that game or with that mini stack and not have to worry about it. But then you're also thinking about, okay, so it's Monday. You've had now 5 games where you've had to dodge a bullet, at the quarterback position from everybody not putting up points. Like, Josh Allen's going to fail. Bo Nix is going to fail. Lamar's going to fail. Like, it just kind of makes it weary as to where, like I'm saying, Kev, if I want to, I'll probably take those 2 pieces if I'm doing a mini, possibly Kyron because of his profile. But then other than that, if I'm playing Stafford or Darnold, I got to game stack that game, because you're thinking that it's just going to be heads and shoulders above, what the rest of the field is offering, in my opinion.
I mean, Puka's probably my favorite wide receiver play on the slate. Like, I think he just smashes. Like, he's just become phenomenal. Like, and Cooper Kupp looks to be dead, but yeah, I mean, I just think overall, just like the bird's eye view of this, and like, of the quarterbacks that I want to play, that those are the guys that I really care about the most. Like, Jalen Hurts obviously concerns me a little bit, because I do think $7,300 for Jalen Hurts is a little bit of a value. But, coming off his concussion that he missed a couple of weeks with and everything else, like, how much do they actually let him run as much? Do they try to protect him a little bit here in a game against the Packers? So, like, I don't know. I think that is one spot that could kill you, because, obviously, if they do let him run, and, he obviously is somebody that can get a couple rushing touchdowns, on this slate. But other than that, like, I just feel the best about the Buffalo Denver game and the Tampa Bay Washington game. And probably if I had to put a third one in there, it probably would be the Washington Tampa Bay game as the 3 that or not Washington, the Minnesota LA game. Sorry. The games that I think that could end up being potential shootouts where you just had to have that game.
So your top 3 quarterbacks are who, Kev, this week?
Jaden Daniels. If we're just talking about like point per with price included, it would be Jaden Daniels 1. I probably put Baker 2, and then Bo Nix 3. I think is where I would put it. And then the other ones, like I've said, like, I think Herbert's a really interesting play on his own. And then I don't know. I just don't get excited to play Sam Darnold and Matt Stafford here. Like, I just feel like I can get their pieces versus playing them together.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. Who are your 3, Maddie?
1 Jaden, 2 Allen, 3 Baker.
Okay. Yeah, and then I think my 1 and 2 are Jaden and Allen as well too. My third is, and I will have a team with him. I'm just gonna say is CJ. It's Stroud.
It is wild that he's 5,500, but he deserves it.
It makes all the sense in the world. It makes all the sense in the world. But when you're talking about the game that we play, from a DFS standpoint, and like Nico, like, he's not going to have 0 ownership, and he's a pretty solid play. Like, I expect him to get fed with volume. I mean, this Chargers defense has been actually beat by wide receiver ones.
They've been bad.
Stellar as I like to think about them as a unit. But he's so cheap, and like the stacking options just kind of make sense. Like, if he goes out there and like, so let's just say, we get that 30 burger, possibly 40 burger from Nico, right? Like, CJ's responsible for that. And so if I can get, I'm hoping for 2-3 touchdowns out of him, and at 5,500, you get the pieces right. Like, I love the Deontay call, Kev. I'm going to have a ton of Deontay on the Saturday game slate because I'm playing CJ there. No surprise. But also, like, you can play Dalton Schultz at, the tight end position. That's kind of gross. I want to stack it with the quarterback. And then you can play Nico, and like, you don't have to really do a lot of guesswork. So he kind of frees up a lot of space on salary. And like, he's the one, if I'm playing a pocket quarterback, let me just get the cheapest guy on the slate in the offense that, like, I think is gonna need to put up points. Again, the total's low, Maddie. That stands out on page, but like we play. it is weird. It is weird, and it's the first game on the slate. So like you're gonna, your team is dead, or looking dead, and you got to look for pivots.
If you play Nico, you'll know whether your team's dead or not.
Right. Exactly.
This game just goes absolutely nuke. It's like 40.
It could. I mean, it easily could. I mean, the Texans can just flow everything through Nico. He drops 40, and then Quentin Johnston's banged up for the Chargers. They've got Disley back, so I mean that whole offense could just run through Ladd and Disley.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
I mean, that game could end up 27-24, 24-21, but it's like three guys that just catch every pass
and do everything.
This is why, because Stroud hasn't scored 20 DK points since week 5.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Right.
But it's also been, hasn't had his 3 wide receivers healthy since like week 5. One of Diggs, Ordell, or Nico has been out, and now it's 2 of those guys are out, so
right.
I just
the offensive line's been bad too. So
I can't.
That is working out for him.
Yeah, I can't personally play Stroud. I love the Nico play. I'm getting my exposure to Stroud through Nico personally. Yeah. It's the same for Puka and Stafford. Like I'm not playing Stafford, but I just think the offense can be so concentrated on those 2 teams.
Yeah,
that you can just play Puka and Nico without the quarterbacks.
So if you want to play Puka and Nico, I guess maybe a good time to switch over because I think I don't know if there's anything else to talk about the quarterbacks, but then what are you doing at running back? I mean,
I'm punting RB2.
Yeah, I think
like Jaylen Warren to me, and I've been just playing tons of Jaylen Warren the last month, and of course it burned me last. I think it was last week whenever they decided to play Najee and not play Jaylen Warren at all, which is total Mike Smith. Arthur Smith. I don't know why I said Mike Smith. Anyways,
it's like a Mike sometimes.
Yeah. Anyways, but Jaylen Warren though, the last time these 2 teams played, he was definitely the preferred option. Utilize him more in the passing game, but he is super cheap. And I think you guys talked about it multiple times already, but Austin Eckler, because Brian Robinson looks dead. He looks terrible. He looks just awful. And it looks like they're just getting tired of him. Because we saw what was it? I think it was last week against the Falcons where there was 2 or 3 drives in a row that we didn't see Brian Robinson didn't even touch the field, and they were putting Chris Rodriguez out there and Jeremy McNichols, and so now getting Austin Eckler back and it's the playoffs. We could see him be heavily involved in this game. We know that the Bucs really bring pressure at a really high rate, and so that is one way to beat that is by dumping off to the running back. And so, Austin Eckler could end up being a play that gets 20 DK points on this slate, and he's $4,800.
Yeah, and similar thoughts for me with Justice Hill. I mean, with the Ravens being without Zay Flowers, they're going to have to get a little creative with how they want to move the ball. I mean, obviously, they can just lean on Derrick Henry if they're leading, but if they're trailing, Justice is obviously the trailing back, the pass catching back. He's got several games where he scored double-digit points, and he's 4,800 too. So, between Warren, Eckler, and Justice, I think one of those guys is going to be my RB2, and then I'm just playing Bucky Irving. I think Bucky's just a smash.
He has to be the most popular play on the slate.
I do not care.
It doesn't even matter.
It doesn't matter.
He's 7K. What are we doing?
Correct. He should be 8. He should be at least 8. I mean, he's gonna touch the ball 25 times.
Unless you buy into the narrative that I think after last week's game, they said that they wanted to get Rachaad White more involved, but whatever.
They're not. I don't. Last week was a must-win game for them, and Rachaad White didn't touch the ball at all. I think that's more indicative.
Right. Bucky Irving's just been phenomenal this year.
Yeah.
Top 5.
There's no reason for Rachaad White to touch the ball.
And this is the best matchup for any running back on this slate, for running backs. And it's not even it's not necessarily phenomenal. It's good. So
the other ones are bad.
The Commanders have allowed the 12th highest yards per carry, but they've allowed the 6th most rushing touchdowns and the 6th highest yards before contact per attempt. So yes, Bucky is a great play. And I think he's the best running back play, just point per dollar on the slate. Again, when I look at it, yes, Saquon can definitely crush me. Derrick Henry can definitely score 3 touchdowns. I think those are in the range of possibility. But I really want to get to some of these high end wide receivers, and you can't do it all with these guys. So I think you just kind of have to take a stand.
Yeah,
you agree?
Yeah, you got to. And so let's talk about the running back position because it is kind of It is the conundrum of the week, and we've kind of talked about it all year of being kind of like a favorable spot to be able to attack from a DFS standpoint. And now here we are, the first weekend of the playoffs, great running backs on a slate, and it's like, well, shit, I don't know what I want to do with these guys because the passing games all look like the areas to target. So like we have a Saquon Barkley who's only at 8,500. We have a Derrick Henry at 8,200 with in a game that I expect Lamar to. Historically, he struggled in the spot like this. So, like, if he struggles again, like, do we not just like what did you bring Derrick Henry in for? You ran the ball only 5 times or whatever it was, last year in a playoff spot that kind of cost you the game. There's no Zay Flowers. Like, if Lamar can't get it done, Henry should be fed the rock against this team. And he's 8,200. He's in a great spot as we've seen playoff King Henry be able to do it before. Shout out to Brooklyn Juice 22 who's coming in the YouTube chat. What's the take on the Ravens? My take is like, I'm going to be low on Lamar. So I do have interest in getting to some Derrick Henry because this is a team that's implied to score over 27 points. Like, it makes you feel like, we can take options on the passing game and I definitely will, but like the ultimate, in game is going to be Lamar or Henry scoring touchdowns. That's what they've shown us, time and time again. And in a spot like this, like, I expect Henry, Henry's probably, I don't want to say he's my favorite, but it makes a lot of sense to be able to get your Ravens exposure through this piece without Zay Flowers. It's just going to be like, what can you do around him and how does that make you feel? Josh Jacobs is in a matchup against Phil. Josh Jacobs is in an interesting spot because him and Saquon, kind of showed out in that Brazil matchup in week 1 when these first two teams, matched up, and the Packers are dealing with their own injury woes. So, we know that they want to give Josh Jacobs the ball, and definitely when they get in the red zone, they want to give him the ball. You got Hurts coming back from a concussion protocol. Like, do we see the tush push at the 1 yard line, or if they get in the 1 yard line in the playoffs, they give Saquon the ball? Who knows? But Saquon, he didn't get to break Dickerson's record. Like, he's coming into a new team in the playoffs. Like, he's hungry. Like, he doesn't get to play in the playoffs all that often in his career playing for the Giants. So like, I expect him to want to show out, and it makes it you're gonna have to take some stands. Like, if you pay up for these guys at running back, you're gonna have to get on some of the mid range in the wide receiver position, which is definitely doable. Granted what your game stack is, but I expect more people to pay up for wide receiver this week than to pay up for running back. Cheap running backs that we talked about, like, I definitely love that we were talking about Austin Eckler because I think he is a very sharp play in a game environment that's going to be explosive. I do have a little interest in Jaylen Warren, although it always does worry me. This is turning out to be like an Austin Eckler, Melvin Gordon situation, I feel like, for the Chargers, of like who gets going, Najee Harris or Jaylen Warren. And everything that stands out on paper this week is that they should be having Jaylen Warren, in this matchup. He's had great receiving success against this team. Like, throwing short is like what Russell has been able to do well the past couple of weeks. So I don't know how they try and get away from Jaylen in this spot. He's 5,200. Like, he makes for an interesting piece to be able to play. I think for me, as I don't have, James Cook is going to be a conundrum for me as well too. It's so tough to just click on this guy because you are just hoping that they get in close and give him the ball. Like, if they get into the 10-yard line, is Josh Allen going to run it himself, or are they actually, going to hand it off to him, or is he going to break a long one? And if they do end up blowing out the Broncos, like, do they get Ray Davis involved? Who knows? So like, it's just always so tough. Like, James Cook could go out there and have his 3 touchdown game, but at 6,700 when he's around, other guys that I could get to, I just don't know if I'll click on his name. But it makes sense, I guess, to play him if you're not getting to Josh Allen, because again, a team that's implied for a ton of points that people aren't going to get to. And then Maddie, before I toss it to you, like, it's going to be gross. Like, I know it's going to be gross. Listen, I've already talked about CJ Stroud, so let me just keep the train rolling here. Cam Akers is 4,800. Now, Aaron Jones has been banged up. He's in a situation where, he should be fed the rock. I think, in this Rams game, he's so great, right, at everything that he does. But is this a situation where they want to when they want to spell him. I mean, Cam Akers in the past couple of weeks has seen, touch increases, really gone to the fold. Now you could say that, like, the Vikings have been, the Green Bay game, that was a close game, and Aaron Jones got a little banged up, so they knew the playoffs were coming. They let him rest. And then we have the Detroit game where that's a must-win game, right? Like, they needed to win that game to win the division. And he's on the field and he's getting targets and he's getting carries. And it's like, wait a second, like, is Cam Akers actually a thing? And then, you guys know me, like, it's all narrative street, right? Like, he's going against his former team. We've seen Cam Akers perform in the playoffs before for this very team, the Rams. It's a neutral site. Like, when we're talking about punting at RB2 at 4,800, and it's a game environment that should have some points, Cam Akers is going to make it into some of my lineups, boys. Like, I'm just going to let you know that, like, from a mini stack standpoint, it feels gross, but like, if I'm playing in some GPPs, like, let's get weird, let's get dicey. So, talking about Cam Akers, Maddie, what are you doing at the running back position? How you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. I mean, he's got the Q tag. I would expect him to play. I mean, him and Dobbins, I think, are the only two that are legitimately questionable from the running back position this week.
Yeah.
It's just, man, I don't know. I think I still prefer playing one of, like, Warren. I was looking at the Steelers logo. Warren, Eckler, or Justice Hill. Because I mean, those guys are pretty much locked into, like, the same role that Akers has. I mean, I guess you could argue Akers does have the upside if, Aaron Jones is banged up and maybe, re-injures himself early or, sits out altogether. I doubt he sits out. He's going to play. He's been practicing limited capacity, so he's definitely going to be out there. But yeah, so I think I side with the other guys, the other cheap running backs. But yeah, I mean, I already touched on it, so I'm not going to go too much more into detail. But it's Bucky Irving for me, and then playing one of those cheap running backs as the RB2.
Yeah, I didn't even hit on Bucky because we talked about so much. I mean, I hate to say that I'll be 100% on anybody because it is a 6-game slate and we kind of know how it goes. I tend to hand build a lot of my lineups as well too, so it gets tougher for me to not get 100% of guys, especially when I like somebody. But I'll probably have north of 80% of Bucky, not quite 100. I'll say it just because of the state of the slate and what Bucky allows you to do with lineups and what he projects at. Like, it's just too cheap. Like, there's no reason Joe Mixon should be higher than him at 7,200 with the way that Bucky's been.
Correct. Yeah, I agree.
It's ridiculous. Kev, let's bring you in here. We're talking running backs. How you feeling? You paying up? You paying down? What are you doing?
I mean, I'm going to try to fit in probably one of the guys and then, like, pay down, kind of like we've talked about. But I think one spot, like, it scares the hell out of me because he's just been so incredibly inefficient, and that's Kyren Williams. But the Vikings recently have actually struggled against the run. Since week 12, they've allowed 130 rushing yards per game, which is actually the highest among all playoff teams that are on this slate. Their 4.73 yards per carry is also the highest. They've allowed the seven touchdowns, which is the fifth most, in the NFL over that span. And so, like, they've actually struggled against the run. So, like, maybe you can get to Kyren Williams, but it's just Kyren Williams just hasn't been great this year. He hasn't really shown much of a ceiling. I mean, you have to go all the way back to, week 3 against San Francisco where he put up 31. Other than that, I mean, he's had some games where he scored, like, low 20s, and maybe that's enough to get there. But, like, I don't know if there's enough there because, like, he has to score a touchdown because he's not really incredibly involved in the passing game. I mean, he does have a couple of games here and there, but for the most part, he's not involved. But, like, I think you could make some sort of a case for him. But, like, the one that I think that could end up coming back and bite people in the ass would be Joe Mixon, who, I know recently, especially the last 4 weeks, he's been just buns, right? But, like, he has been a player that earlier in this year that, I mean, he was scoring 29, 30, 29, 26, 38. Like the upside is there if they could, I think if they could build a lead where we know that they will feed him the rock, they will utilize him in the passing game. And so, like, Joe Mixon, and he's 7,200. So, like, he's not overly expensive either comparatively to some of the other running backs on the slate. And so, like, I think he could be the one that could end up biting you in the ass if you don't have any exposure to him because he definitely has that ceiling that could compete with a Derrick Henry or a Saquon Barkley. Because when I look at Saquon, like, again, Saquon is extreme boomer bust. He's either going to put up 30 or he can give you 9. Like, because he's not heavily involved in the passing game, because they don't look to check down to him, that the way he's utilized, basically he has to, see massive amount of workload, but he ends up have to score touchdowns. And it worries you when you don't have Jalen Hurts out. When you have Jalen Hurts out there, that the possibility of him losing that type of workload is definitely possible. And he's $8,500. And so while yes, Saquon Barkley can easily be the best running back on the slate and smash you, it also feels like maybe at his cost and with the way the slate builds, like it feels better to like not paying up at that extreme tier of those two and trying to hit on a Bucky or a Joe Mixon and then paying down at the like I already said, Jalen Warren, Austin Eckler types.
Yeah, I love that call out there, Kev. I think that, for me, I'm going to have to come to a realization with like, I do kind of like Houston. And so like, I don't need to play CJ Stacks to be able to just get there. I could play, the Mixon one-off, hope he gets in, because he's been phenomenal in, neutral or leading game scripts for this team. And if CJ is, struggling, but they are able to move the ball and like Chargers don't turn it over. But let's say they get a turnover force, like they're going to try and get Mixon going in this game. They haven't really been in that situation in a couple of weeks since when they played the Jaguars. He's kind of been game scripted out. So yeah, this is another guy, right? He's in a new situation, a new team, and like he's had some playoff experience before. I think they definitely lean on him, and they haven't had it, a guy of his magnitude. They've had it, Damian Pierce and, all these Devin Singletary, that I think they have a chance there to really get it going with Mixon. So definitely love that call out there. Yeah, this is a good slate. So guys at the top that you like, Kev?
Like I said, I don't like if I had to pick, it would be Derrick Henry, just because game script, environment, and everything here. You could see a scenario where they do feed him and he gets, and we know once they get down to the thing you don't have to worry about with Derrick Henry is him really being vultured from touchdowns, right? Like a Saquon can, like some of these other running backs will, because you're not worried about the quarterback taking the ball in. Like same thing with James Cook. I mean, it's the same thing you're worried about with him, even though he scored a ton of touchdowns this year. You're not worried about that with Derrick Henry. So I think if I had to pick one of the high priced running backs, it would be Derrick Henry that I would want to go with at 8,200. But I really have no interest I have zero interest in Josh Jacobs. None. Like the Eagles have been phenomenal as a run defense. I don't love I obviously I have no interest in, like I said, Jacobs. Williams, I think, is, like I've said, like, do you guys have any interest of even playing him? Because like the matchup is there, like at least recently it's been good, but like he's just so inefficient.
Yeah, I do, Kev, and the main reason why you is what you touched on. And again, it is a 6-game slate, but it is still like it's not the 14-er that we just had in week 18. Like if Kyren goes out and gets 19 or 20 points, like I might be cool with that. Like if Derrick Henry and Saquon don't have like, or I guess Mixon too, or Jacobs, like if these guys don't go out and have mega games on Sunday and Saturday, like, and I'm only looking at like 25 points as the upside there, then like yeah, I could talk myself into having some Kyren that I'm waiting for on Monday, and like if he gets 19 or 20 and I save some money and salary on that could be enough to get to somebody else that I like. So yeah, I don't know what his full ceiling is, but like they've shown that they want to have him involved. They want to be able to get him going. Like this is a playoff game, like season on the line. I expect him to fully be able to touch the rock. And just look what happened last week. Like Sean McVay is the best at like treating each game like a new game and new script. Like they just watched this Detroit and Minnesota game. I know they did, and Jahmyr Gibbs was having his way with this team, and they're like, okay, how can we do that with Kyren? Like he's capable of it. Stafford's gonna have to drop some screams from him. Like we need to feed him the rock. Like they're vulnerable. Let's get after it. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting there. But I do have interest in Kyren from that standpoint. Maddie, how you got to take on Kyren, and then who are your top 3 backs?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kyron's fine. I just don't see myself going double running back up top because I want to go double receiver up top personally. So, I mean, if I was going to play Kyron and be over Bucky, I'm just not doing that. But, I'm also only playing one team. So, but I mean, in this same matchup, earlier this year in week 8, Kyron had 23 for 97 and caught five balls on 7 targets for 19 yards and a receiving touchdown. So, he scored 23 DK points. So it's definitely possible. And he's so touchdown, involved in the touchdown department for the Rams that he can certainly score multiple times in this game. So, because I expect there to be points on both sides. And, if the touchdowns just flow through Kyren, that's leverage off of Puka, who's going to be 45% owned. So I'm cool with it. I'm probably not going there, but I don't hate it at all.
Yeah. Kyren and Puka make for a really great mini. I feel like a really sharp mini on this slate where Puka does all the damage in between, the 20s and whatnot, and Kyren somehow gets the touchdowns and can still get there.
Kyren's leverage off of both Puka and Bucky, because Bucky and Puka are both going to be over 40% owned, and Kyren's the same price as both of them. Essentially, he's sandwiched in between the two, and if people go only one pay up, they're going to go Bucky over Kyren. So he's definitely in play.
Yeah. It pains me. I think it's going to be tough for me if I have to pay up. If I have $8,500 and I have to choose between Saquon and Henry, it will be tough. I probably will go Saquon because of the matchup. But man, it's like not having Lamar and or Henry on a team is, you're just going to be holding your breath with that Saturday matchup. But it definitely could get there. I mean, the Steelers are the cheapest defense. We won't talk about them just quite yet. But like, I have some lineups where I'm like, I might just take the Steelers D at 2,200, and it's okay to not have Ravens in a spot like that. But I think I'll have to talk myself into some mixing interest just because of how I'm coming in on Stroud. But then obviously we'll be building around Bucky a lot. I think Kyron's going to be fair enough for me to get to at 7,400. And then again, like the pay down of Cam Akers, I do like as a pivot off of some of the other, cheap guys that I expect to be a little bit more popular than him, and just, hoping that, Jones isn't 100% healthy and it's a good game environment, and, none of these other guys go out and smash and could have Cam Akers sitting there.
Is this the Miles Sanders call from last week?
It might be shut up. Hey, I don't always get those cheap guys, right? But it's reading in the tea leaves, right? Like they said that Miles Sanders was going to be active, and like it just was a situation where, again, a game environment, right? That was a game environment that everybody wanted to play, and he was the minimum, and nobody was talking about him, and it's just like he could let's play him. Let's get to some of these other dudes. And like that could be Cam Akers this week. Like it's a game environment that everybody wants to play. And so to me, it's like all the pieces become in play in that standpoint. Like this is a game of chess that we play. This DFS, it's a bitch, but we love it, and we just want to get. We're hoping for a touchdown. We're hoping for a touchdown, and then whatever happens after that could be real nice. Before I'm going to have you just start it off, Maddie, at wide receiver, because I know you really like the guys at the top. But shout out to Brooklyn Juice 22 once again. He's asking about FanDuel here. Doesn't have the full 4-game slate, only 2-2. They do have a Saturday and a Sunday only slate. That is correct. But I believe they do have this Saturday through Monday slate as well. They don't have a just weekend slate, at least not that I'm seeing. So yeah, Brooklyn, if you're playing on FanDuel, you're definitely, probably going to want to do, the minis of Saturday and then the Sunday 3-gamer, Monday Island. But you could also do the Saturday through Monday, and they have some decent contests for that. So get some action on there if you like. Maddie, talk to us about wide receiver. I'll have you started off here and what you're doing at the position, and who are these guys that you want to get to where you're, paying down for one of your running back spots.
I'm going to have 2 of the 3 guys at the top. Puka, Jefferson, and Nico. I think 2 of those guys, maybe all 3 of them, absolutely smash this week. And it's a matter for me, like, because I'm just debating, if I play Puka, do I have to have Jefferson? My gut says yes, because I don't really like any other Vikings. And I feel like if I'm playing Puka, I need to play one of the Vikings just because of that, like you said, the game environment. Whereas, if I'm playing, let's say like Will Disley or somebody like that, that's a cheap charger, I don't necessarily have to have Nico on the other side, but the volume can flow through Nico. But that game, if that game sails over that total of 41, I mean, it's going to be Nico, from the Texans side. And then, it's an easy run back, whether it's Ladd or Will Disley for the Chargers. So I would probably play like, the same way I'm playing Puka with Jefferson, I would almost pair Nico with Ladd or Nico with Disley. I wouldn't play Nico by himself, I don't think. Because I think both those teams, Chargers and Houston, if that game is not going back and forth, both those teams will look to run the ball and just sit on it and not necessarily, there might not be big plays down the field a ton. So
especially the Chargers.
So, if Nico's getting going, then the Chargers can't sit on it. And then you'll want to have a Chargers run back, because if the Chargers are forced to throw the ball, they're definitely going to put up points through the air, because the Houston pass defense hasn't been great. So I think you mini stack that first game, Chargers Houston, or you just leave it alone entirely. My gut is just currently stack Puka with Jefferson, and fit in those cheap receivers that I mentioned I like for Washington, around Jaden Daniels or Baker Mayfield, and get the cheap pieces from that Tampa Bay Washington game. So like Zacchaeus, right? He's kind of taken over that number 2 role in that offense for Washington. Over the last couple of weeks, he's had 5, 9, and 8 targets in the last 3.
Mm-hmm.
And if teams are going to key on McLaurin, which it seems like they did last week, at least Dallas did, these guys like Ertz and Zacchaeus are gonna be the focal point of the offense. And it's like you said, Ryan, and keep going back to it, cheap pieces in a good game environment. That's what I'm looking for from my value wide receivers. So I like those guys. Another one from the same game, I don't love it, but Sterling Shepard's another one who's just on the field and a part of that game environment, and if you expect Mike Evans to be not producing to his normal output because he's facing Lattimore, the ball's going to go elsewhere. McMillan's 5'2". I would like him if he was in the 4s, like mid 4s, low 4s, like he has been. 5'2" is a little expensive for me on this slate. Like if I'm paying 5'2" for McMillan, I'd almost rather just pay 5'7" for Devontae Smith. Let me find $500 extra dollars. Or even 900 more for Addison at 6'1", right? Like, so McMillan just starts to get into that weird range. He's right there with Bateman and Shakir as well. So I think going down to the value guy with Shepard he's definitely in play. De'Ami Brown's another one. If you're playing Jaden Daniels and you don't want to play Zacchaeus, Brown's, he's only got, I think, one game this year over 10 DK points. So it's definitely a shot in the dark. But again, it's just you're betting on a game environment. Maybe he catches a long touchdown, and you're living, through that. So it's those guys. And then I'd say Wicks is probably the other cheap guy that I'm interested in, with Christian Watson being out. But the Philly defense has just been so good this year, especially against receivers. So it's kind of tough for me to like that game. I think that's a lower scoring game personally. But yeah, Wicks is another one due to injury. And then you brought it up. I'll let you talk about it, but even the Bills receivers, like the secondary guys, Mac Hollins, he can catch a touchdown. Keon Coleman's 4'6", Amari Cooper's 4'9".
Yep.
Curtis Samuel's 3'1". Like Knox is 3K, I think, and Kincaid is, we haven't got a tight end yet, but Knox is cheap, and then Kincaid, he is also 4K flat. So like the entire Bills offense outside of Cook and Allen is essentially free. So I don't hate taking shots on receivers there either.
Yeah, so well, one, God, so many things you brought up, Maddie, that I think is great. I'm going to hit on these points before I toss it to Kev. Buffalo. So yeah, Josh Allen, Mac Hollins is the first name I'm clicking on because he's 3,800 and he frees up a lot of what I'm able to do on a Josh Allen team. All depends on who we expect Surtain to be covering. I imagine it would be Amari Cooper. I'm not sure about that, but like Khalil Shakir has been really good, and I don't think I want to play Allen without him, because he's the most volume receiver in this offense, I think, as it stands right now, and he's only 5,300. So to be able to pair him with Allen, like, I'll take a shot like that, and then hope that Hollins is the other guy that catches the touchdown. I get that right, and possibly even Kincaid too. Like, you could play him at tight end at a position where there's not a lot that stands out on the page that you're going to be missing out on. So just tying the tight end to the quarterback is great. I'm not playing Dontavian Wicks on any teams this week. Like, how many times do we have to do the Dontavian Wicks thing? It's kind of getting ridiculous at this point. And I will say, like, in a matchup like this where Philly's been so good, and we'll see where Kev's on this because we don't align all that much, but we've been aligning so far, so I expect him to just burn me for this take. But like Jaden Reed's only 5,500, and like if you want to get something going on offense, like how can you not get this guy the ball? Like if they're not going to be able to run with Jacobs and Christian Watson's out, you're not going to be able to take off the top. Let's get Jaden Reed going here. Like this dude can do so many things as a Swiss Army knife. We've seen it time and time before. I don't know how they could be sitting in an offensive room and not be trying to get this guy going. I think Dobbs is another interesting piece there too, but because of the way they utilize Reed, I'd rather get to him, even though, and it's only $100 difference. Well, I thought it was more than that, but yeah, at $100 difference, I'm probably going to take Reed as an ISO play. I'm not playing Jordan Love this week, but if you were playing Jordan Love, that's probably where I'd get my Dobbs exposure. And then McMillan, like Maddie, we tend to agree a lot on this show, but like I couldn't disagree with you more on McMillan. Like I get it, Shepard's coming back, Otten's coming back, but like if anything, if Lattimore is going to be shutting down Mike Evans, like McMillan has to be getting targets in this matchup here. It's still a pretty decent matchup, like outside of that. And look at what McMillan's been doing, like so far this year, stepping into for Chris Godwin. Like he's been absolutely stellar for Baker. And I think they've kind of, develop some trust there. Like he's going to him so much. He's looking at him, when they get into the red zone, like for targets, if Evans is covered, and like Kate Otten being there, I think, is a slight ding to McMillan for, just on paper, but like in the grand scheme of things, like he's been playing with this guy in must-win situations, right, for so many weeks now. And McMillan's shown that profile. Like I think if anybody, like Shepard is off the reservation for me outside of Baker Stacks because of that. And this was like, we were doing the roulette with this team, right? Like, is it going to be Raheem Jarrett? Is it going to be Shepard? Is it going to be Trey Palmer? Is it going to be McMillan? And McMillan's shown that, like, he's that guy. I get it, Maddie. Like, he's 5,200, and we've been used to paying, paying cheap dirt prices on this guy. But like, if he's putting up 18, 19, 21, 24, like at 5,200, I could get behind that for sure. And like, this is a game where I expect points to be scored. So like McMillan might be that key piece for me if I'm not going to get to Evans. So I just had to, had to touch on that because that McMillan's actually a guy who stands out to me because I'm not playing Evans outside of a Baker team. And I do want exposure to that game. Kate Otten's definitely going to be in my player pool, but I think McMillan will have to be as well too. And then real quickly, Maddie, like you brought up that Chargers game, Lad McConkey, Derek Stingley's still been pretty good for this Texans team. And so like, I'm just having a hard time. Like, is he just going to be, is it Quentin Johnson just saw 14 targets? So we're going to put Stingley on Quentin Johnson and just not let him beat us deep, or like, he still has, questionable hands. So I don't know if they want to put him on Lad or put, but he doesn't really travel all that much. So like, what's your read on that, if anything, on, who's going to be able to get open for the Chargers if they're not covered?
I mean, any of these slot guys, I tend to not really worry about cornerback matchups for the slot guys because they can do a lot of creative things with the formations, move them around and get them open just from, motions and bunches, bunch formats and all that. So, Lad's probably the one guy that's kind of agnostic to a cornerback matchup. And, my thing with Lad is I haven't played him all year because he just rarely gets 100 yards, and I know he's done well, but like, what's his true ceiling, and he's priced up at 6'8", and that's the most expensive he has been the entire season, right? Like he started the season out at 4.7 in week 1, and he's gone up almost every single week, very, 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 very small increments. He was 6,600 in week 17, and now he's 68, but like, he's got one 29-point game. That was week 17 against New England, 10 for 94 and 2. But outside of that, I mean, there's a 23 and a 21, and then there was a 32 against New Orleans. But everything else is like either single digits or, 17 points. And I mean, I guess it's fine, but he's 6'8" now, right? And Puka's 7'6", and Nico's 7'8", and Jefferson's 8'1", and Addison's 6'1", and those guys for me just have much, much higher ceilings.
Yeah, which is why, I think for me, on my CJ Stroud team, I do have McConkey because, if you get the game environment, then, McConkey's getting there from volume. Collins and McConkey mini stack, like, I don't know, maybe, like, I think yeah, you could say, okay, Nico, like he is the heart and soul of this offense from a passing game. Like he definitely has to be involved to be able to get there on the island. Like then having McConkey just as a mini, I know it feels pretty thin, but Maddie, we did the same exercise not even 2 weeks ago, again, in the New England game. And it was like, if you didn't have McConkey, you were dead on the small slate. Like he's just so involved as a first read. Now that was Will Dissly's first game back in action, I want to say, right? So like, and he wasn't seeing the field until, kind of later on in that game. And then he was able to get back to, what we had been seeing Will Dissly do, which is like being, everywhere over the middle before, Stone Smart decided to become a thing. So Dissly's definitely of interest to me, from a mini standpoint, because the tight end position isn't really all that great. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to say, it's hard to talk about this guy in the same respect as like, Puka and, I guess Jefferson, but like he is so involved in this offense, McConkey that is, and we could be looking back on this and being like, damn, he was only 6,800. Like, but the game environment has to be there. I feel like it can't be a 20 to 17 or 14 game and getting a usable score out of him. I just don't think that's going to be that way on this 6-game slate. But if this game goes over the total that me and you both expect, that's where my interest comes from.
Yeah, like I think if he gets 17, it's fine. But Puka and Jefferson and those guys are just going to blow right by him.
Right.
Well, then I think a fair question is also why not Quentin Johnson? Like, what? Because if you look, so Ladd has 4 games this year where he scored 20 or more DK points, and Quentin Johnson has 3. And one thing to keep in mind here is Joshua Palmer is not playing in this game, and so that is like what we've seen about 5 or 6 targets. Leave this offense. I mean, now you're depending on guys like DJ Chark and Darius Davis. I mean, we're in the playoffs, so like. I expect that Quentin Johnson is going to see a pretty good solid target share. And we've seen now Justin Herbert in, I think, 5 straight games drop back 35 or more times. And so, like I think Quentin Johnson, who is significantly cheaper, I think he's $2K cheaper than what Ladd McConkey is. Like, I think there's a case to be made for Quentin Johnson here, in this spot and in this game. Like, don't get me wrong.
Who's 1,500 cheaper than QJ? Will Dissly.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying. So, like, I think like if you're wanting to do like a mini stack of that game, like I think the cheaper route could be going Quentin Johnson and Nico Collins.
I like Dissly, Nico personally.
Yeah, I think
it's the same premise. Kev is to just get a value guy from the Chargers with pairing him with Nico and not going double pay up from that game.
Yeah,
I do like QJ, but I think if I'm playing QJ, then I think I talk myself into just playing.
You have to play Herbert.
Double. Yeah, and it's McConkey or I guess Dissly with him.
I would go Herbert QJ Dissly and Nico and just pay up for all the dudes after that
and hope that McConkey doesn't bong you.
You just hope. I mean, if you're playing QJ, he's taking away from McConkey.
That's fair.
And then Dissly gets the touchdown or 2.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I like it. Kev, talk to us about wide receiver, man. Where are you at? And let me have it on Dontavian Wicks.
No, I'm fine with that. I mean, I think we've been chasing the Dontavian Wicks train all year, and it hasn't really come through. I don't mind, especially Jaden Reed 5,500. But the same thing with Jaden Reed. I feel like we've been chasing that, all year as well. And it just hasn't, like, it's just been such a weird year for the Packers, the way they've utilized wide receivers in their passing game.
But we knew this,
great.
Steph.
I know the first time these 2 teams played, Jaden Reed scored 36 in that game, but that was, he also only had 6 targets at, 138 yards and a touchdown in that game. I think he also had a rushing touchdown, but which is something that they haven't really utilized them that much this year. Where last year they utilized him a lot, on end arounds and as a runner, and they just haven't really done that as much with him this year. So it's been kind of a weird year for him. But I agree. I mean, the 2 top pay-ups are for Nico and Puka. Like, it's just they're the easy ones for me. Like, I think they're the 2 best plays, on the slate. Like, I think there's real concerns with Marshawn Lattimore being on that field. Like, just historically, I mean, they played so much. Like, this is a short sample size. I mean, he has, taken his lunch. I mean, he's Debo. He comes up, takes his chain from him, like, every single time. Like, he's averaging 9.2 fantasy points per game. Historically, in games with, when he's played against Marshawn Lattimore, and I fully expect him to shadow Mike Evans in that game. And so, like, if that happens and we get that, then like, where's the ball going? Like, it has to go to Jalen McMillan, because Jalen McMillan has been like easily their best option, over the last month of the season. And so, I mean, Jalen McMillan isn't expensive. He's 5,200. And so, like, I think you have to get there. Like, I think that would be the logical choice if that's what you expect to happen here. And so I think Jalen McMillan is a really solid play. Marvin Mims, I think he's overpriced for his role, because he's still only running 50% of the routes, which is absolutely wild. But he scored 20 or more DK points in 3 of his last 5 games. But what I will say is that's kind of interesting is the way they've been utilizing him. And they basically have been using him a lot on these like bubble screens and trying to get the ball in his hands in really unique ways. And it's paid off, because, I mean, that's where he's really started to shine and he's really started to explode recently. And so, yeah, from the slot, he is averaging 5.37 yards per route run. And from the backfield, he's averaging 4.36 yards per route run. Out wide, he's averaging 0.6 yards per route run. And so, and this is really where the Bills have struggled. They've allowed the second most fantasy points per game to wide receivers on screens this year. And so I think that's something you're probably going to see them try to do a lot, is get the ball in his hands in unique ways, because how super explosive he is. And so while, yes, he is a scary play, and I think it is a little bit more boom or bust because he's not a full-time player, but just the way they've been utilizing him and the way they've been using him, I think it makes a lot of sense at 5,100. The Ravens situation is tough, because I fully expect, I would expect probably Joey Porter's probably shadow Rashad Bateman in this game. I would bet, because, I mean, who else are you really worried about outside of the tight ends? I mean, I guess so that if that is what happens, I think that's where you have to look at someone like Nelson Aguilar is $3,400. Like somebody's got to get the ball here if they're, when they decide to throw the ball. And so, I mean, he's 3,400. And so, as a value play, like I was saying, like, I think he is a solid value play type option, type punt.
Yeah, they still have a million guys though.
I mean, you're talking about like at that point, like, Tez Walker and
Tylan Wallace, and,
I mean,
Bateman and Justice Hill, Derrick Henry.
It's your 2 tight ends. I mean,
Keaton Mitchell.
Oh, for sure. Like, we'll get there.
Andrews.
Like, yeah, I definitely think Isaiah Likely is a phenomenal play. But
those guys are getting targeted 20 times.
Yeah, I think. Let me see. I actually haven't looked. Let me see what Aguilar's ownership is. None of the Ravens are actually popular. So, I mean, I think it's fine. I don't like it personally, but it's fine. Yeah, I see Aguilar at like 3%. If he was any more popular than that, I would say no. I'm out.
It's I don't know. Like, he's going to get, the 50 or 60 yard touchdown as this guy always does. I feel like when we come to playoff times, like he's always good for this just stupid touchdown. And then he'll have like 2 other catches outside of that. So, like, you'll be happy that you got the touchdown from him, but I don't know that he'll end up being, an optimal piece, so to speak. Because I just feel like they'll run 2 tight end sets, so much against this team.
Are you guys making any teams with only 1 or 0 of the top 3? And just going full blown mid range and not playing any of these cheap options? Because like you could make a team that's got like Ladd and Addison and McMillan and one of like Puka.
Yeah, I think I will. I just haven't got there, Maddie, because I always tend to. I mean, I build more than one team. Obviously, you're one teamer, so it's a little bit different. But I do tend to get like I'm gonna have a team that has Henry and Saquon on it. So like, I'm gonna have to get creative there, and then I'm gonna have a Josh Allen team, which is gonna make it tough to get to, those guys. I think I can probably get to Nico, but it'll be tough. I feel like to get to Jefferson.
Is it wild that we haven't even talked about Cooper Kupp? Like, I have no interest in playing him, but I'm just saying, like, he's $6,400. It's just wild that, like,
yeah,
but he's been bad. Like, they haven't utilized. They haven't wanted to play him. They haven't looked for him. I mean, Puka's just seeing just this massive target share every single week. But like I think somebody in this range is definitely you're going to need it. I think Terry McLaurin could definitely. I mean, Terry McLaurin is the cheapest he's been since week 6. Like
Terry McLaurin with Jaden Daniels, I think is I'm curious to see how many people actually play Terry McLaurin with Jaden Daniels, because
I mean, since week 12, I mean, he scored 24, 27, 26, 17, then he had the 1.5 where he was only targeted he was targeted 7 times, only had 1 catch. Yeah. And then, last week
in
Dallas
his range, though,
back up again for 20.
That's what's so scary, is like it's in his range. So like people will look at it and say, okay, like we talked about Maddie at the top. Zacchaeus, great. Like he's been so involved lately. Like we don't have to worry about fucking Noah Brown and these other guys. And then Ertz. And it's like, okay, these guys are salary savers. Like it's so great that I think that McLaurin could be, kind of scripted out. But again, this is like one of the favorable matchups that we've targeted all year with this Tampa Bay D. And like, would I be surprised if F1 goes out there and actually is F1? Like probably not. So I do like getting to him. I will not play him outside of a Jaden stack, but I think my Jaden stack definitely has to have him just because of what his ceiling is. Now his floor is so scary that like it just is what it is. But you want to try and get those points. I mean, I just think about that, whatever that Island game was, early on the season, and the late, fucking touchdown that he has to this guy for 70 yards or whatever. Like this dude just can take a slate to the moon, with this program.
Well, like George Pickens is the same way. Like George, like we've been like, but that whole thing, that whole experiment just seems like it's coming to an end soon, because like George Pickens just seems, I don't know, it's just been wild. But like the upside,
Ravens defense has been good ever since they moved Hamilton to safety.
Yes,
really good,
phenomenal. But the one thing that Russell still does really well is hit the deep ball. I mean, George Pickens
for sure,
but and then like Jordan Addison, like there's a case between Jordan Addison to Justin Jefferson. Like Justin Jefferson's so expensive at 8,100. Jordan Addison has been really solid this entire year. And while Justin Jefferson certainly can break this entire slate, but at cost, like he's been much more like getting you like 20 points versus those huge ceiling games. He has a couple of those this year where he has with nuclear. It's definitely in the range of possibility. But like I found myself when I've tried to build lineups so far, like playing more like Puka and Jordan Addison, like as a stack, or Puka and TJ Hawkinson, and not forcing in Justin Jefferson. So I feel like if Justin Jefferson goes nuclear, then you'd want to play Sam Darnold with him.
I mean, not necessarily. I think that you can have an outcome where Justin just does everything, and like that it might be fine. Like, if he gets a 3-touchdown game, then we start to think about Darnold, because he's getting close to 400, and if he has 3 or 4 or whatever. But like, if all the scoring just goes through Justin, it could be all right. It could be all right. But I mean, I tend to agree with you, Kev. That's what we just talked about with F1. Like, if I'm normally trying to get the best player, if I play the quarterback, like just who has the highest ceiling, that's just my natural. But if I'm building multiple teams, I'm going to think about a scenario where like, okay, like I can get to Justin without necessarily having Sam Darnold, and just I expect all the production to go through him. What's crazy though is like on the other side of that game, before we talk about tight end, because I do think it's an interesting point. And Maddie, I hear you. Like Cooper Kupp has been abysmal. Like he's been so bad. He cost people their fantasy playoffs. Like Puka has taken the world by storm. He's Matt Stafford's guy. Like we know all that. But like when push comes to shove, like this dude is still on the field at an insane rate. And like Brian Flores talked about it. Like that game was right when Puka was supposed to be coming back, when these two teams first met. And he said he didn't expect the motherfucker to play. He was just like, we planned all week for Puka to not be out there. Like, I think Brian Flores remembers that shit. And he's like, this dude is not beating me. Like, I'm going out for coaching jobs. Like, this is a playoff game. Whatever we have to do, get on Puka. Now, is that enough to stop Puka? I don't think so. I still think that Puka is a strong play. But is there a scenario where I'm like, Cooper Kupp, like he's still out there? Like, remember me? Like, remember that report we used to have, Matthew? Like, we can get going. It could be interesting, dude. And like his ownership is going to be nothing compared to what Puka is. And like we play this is a game we play. Like from a leverage standpoint, I'm gonna have, especially on like when we're talking about teams and you're looking at that PMR and it's like, I know who you have left. You got Puka left. Like I have Cup left. Is it a chance that the ball just finds Cup more than it finds Puka? Yeah, there might be a chance. And so I definitely want to have some Cup exposure. It's not like I'm going to attack my teams and like, oh, I have to get Cup over Puka. No, not necessarily. I definitely want Puka. But if it comes down to I would need a Rams piece or one of Rams piece in that game for a mini, and I got that 6,400 instead of 75, like I'm okay with clicking his name because he's still out there and like nobody's going to play him and we could just be sitting back. It's a Monday slate and like, oh yeah, Cooper still exists. Like, yeah, no shit. He's on the field all the time. Like Demarcus Robinson's an afterthought. Like, yeah, Tyler Higbee's back and Kyron doesn't have the same like receiving profile as all these other guys. Like it's those two dudes. It just has been leaps and bounds against, in Puka's favor. But if anybody knows how to scheme up a way to contain what's been happening, it could be Flores. So I'm in on Cup.
I think to be fair, like the Rams offense are just dog shit the last 3 weeks where they've scored 13, 19, and 12. Like, yeah, I mean, he's only seen 3 targets, in each of those 3 games. And, maybe it has something to do with it, like of why their offense has been so poor. But like, I mean, he has ceiling games this year. I mean, even just going back to week 11, he put 31.6. He has a game where he put up 35 against Detroit. I mean, he has, multiple 20-point games this year. Like, it's not crazy to think that, like, I know it's like, oh yeah, I'm not doing it because of the last 3 weeks of the season, but like, he certainly could be a player that like puts up 25, 30. Like it is certainly in his range of outcomes and he's 0% on.
Yeah, it hasn't been happening. So it's hard. And Maddie, if I had one team, I mean, you would have to get close to, pulling that trigger on the gun to my head, like before I'm clicking on Cub's name, because it's been so disappointing all year long, or recently, like since Puka's been, coming into this alpha role, it's been so tough. And I've been there before numerous times, but like, it's a fresh slate. It's the playoffs. Like, it's insane. It's an insane pivot point. I'm not even going to say it's leverage because I don't even want to give Cooper Kupp that much grace, but like the pivot off of Puka, if things break Kupp's way, is insane. And that could definitely win you a GPP right there.
Yeah.
No, I hear you.
Fun shit, boys. I love it. I love this. I mean, this is just like Thanksgiving, to the moon, that slate that we're talking about. It's a fun one. This is the last time we're going to get a slate of this magnitude as we get into, we're going to get to the divisional rounds, 2 days of football. Then we're going to get to the conference championship and Super Bowl. And we're going to be here with you guys, through all that. So shout out to everybody who's been rocking along with us, the DGen Nation family, the TFA family. It's been great. Shout out to everybody who's listening to this show right now. As you know how we do it. We're at the 90-minute mark, and we're going to get to tight ends and defense and build that team and, get you guys out of here, at a reasonable time. But this is all fun conversation, and I know that's why you guys come here is to listen to where our thoughts are and how we're seeing the slate. And hopefully you guys are seeing the same way too, because the game that we play, DFS, we got to get off the reservation a little bit. And it's fun to always talk about those scenarios with you guys and do so. Before we move it over to tight end, Maddie, You've talked about Bo Nix a ton on the show. You talked about Cortland Sutton a ton on the show. We didn't talk about Cortland Sutton at all. He's 6,600 in what I expect to be the second targeted game environment on this slate. Do we have any interest in Cortland Sutton? Like, to me, what Kev brings up with Mims, like Mims is now 5,200. Like, now we're starting to think about, okay, like from a one-off perspective, I'm probably leaning to go Sutton more than I am to Mims, but it's been tough to, it's tough to think about playing him solo, like without having Bo Nix there. If I'm playing Bo Nix, I'm definitely getting to some Sutton, but we just didn't talk about him. So I'm curious to see where your head's at on him.
Yeah. I mean, I've been on him for the most of the year and was on him, before the season, but I just can't click Sutton over Ladd. I can't click Sutton over Terry McLaurin. I can't click Sutton over you guys just talked about Cooper Kupp, 6,500.
Damn.
Sutton, I'm not clicking Sutton over Devontae Smith at 5,700. I'm not clicking Sutton over 6,100 Addison. It's just, I think there's just better options. I mean, I get it. And if you're playing Allen, I mean, and you think the Broncos are gonna push them, I mean, sure. but I'm not going there.
I hear you. I hear you. No, it's a tough call. I do like him on mixed teams for sure, but outside of that, I don't see myself getting exposure to him because of those other guys who are pivots around them. Maddie, take it away with us at the tight end position. Let's talk about this because it's pretty gross. Like it's not the best when we're talking about just studs at the tight end position that we would want to get in our team. So I mean, we talk about it every week, I feel like, on the show, and nothing, it doesn't ring true more than it does this week. But like, if you're playing tight end, you're looking to pair him with your quarterback. The only tight end that I think I have interest in, I guess there's two. Like, if I can get to Mark Andrews or Isaiah Likely, I'm apt to play these guys without having Lamar because of the Zay Flowers situation and what that means. I mean, Mark Andrews, this guy was talked about being dropped in redraft leagues after 5 weeks because he wasn't catching any touchdowns. So like week 1, everybody spent their fab on Isaiah Likely because he goes out there and has a nuclear game, in the first game of the season for Baltimore, and then he kind of becomes quiet. But now that we take Zay Flowers out of the picture, and Mark Andrews had a touchdown in 11 touchdowns this year, like leading all tight ends, and like he's got a touchdown in however many straight games. Like he's been absolutely incredible. He's your highest priced tight end, but then you got Isaiah Likely, who is $1,500 cheaper in a spot where he could see more on the field. Like those are the two guys that I want to play, from a island option, I guess, so to speak. But other than that, like I'm looking to get tight ends with the quarterback. Maddie, how are you seeing the tight end situation this week?
I think tight end's probably the best value, so I probably go double tight end on this slate personally. And I think there's some good options. I mean, I like Hawk. I'm not going to play him because he's projecting as the highest owned tight end, and I'm just not going to do that, especially if I'm not playing Darnold. So I'll be out on Hawk. You mentioned the Ravens guys. Both Likely and Andrews are in play. Likely's projecting for more ownership than Andrews because of his price, which makes me like Andrews more. And Andrews without Zay Flowers should continue to be heavily involved. I mean, he saw 8 targets last week when Zay left the game early. And that is actually the most targets he's seen all season, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, Andrews has just been a touchdown machine. I mean, he's caught a touchdown in almost every game this year. So both those guys absolutely in play. We talked about Will Dissly as a cheap option, getting exposure to that Chargers offense that's a little banged up at the receiver position. Ertz, I love Ertz this week because I'm playing Jaden Daniels. So I like him a lot. And then the other side of that game, I mean, how many times have we seen Cade Otton break a slate? And we keep talking about, if it's not Evans, who's it going to be? So
Right.
Cade Otton's 4,100. He's not priced up really for what his ceiling is. I mean, he's got a couple games of in the 20s and had a 29 burger earlier this year when he was essentially a lock. But I know he's got a Q tag, but I'm assuming he'll be out there.
He was the lock to some, Maddie, just not all.
Yeah, just not everybody.
Okay. We're forgiving.
Okay. We live and we learn.
We live and we learn. We live and we learn. Kev, how are you living and learning this week at the tight end position, and where are your lineups taking you on your builds?
Not Cade Otton.
Here we go again.
Cade Otton for 30.
Yeah, here we go again.
No, I mean, I think it's fine, but yeah, we've kind of talked about this a bunch already, but Isaiah Likely, it's just $3,200. I mean, he should be, in my mind, one of the highest owned tight ends on the slate. And if he's not, I think it's a huge mistake. Just the cost, the role is going to, I think the role jump is going to be pretty big with Zay Flowers out. I mean, last week he did see 5 targets last week, and I just think he's one of their most dynamic weapons they have. Once you remove Zay Flowers from the game, and so just at cost, I will be having a lot of Zay Flowers. Does the TJ Hawkinson thing make sense? Because one, schematically, it's a great matchup. The Rams have been really bad against tight ends this year, 3rd most DK points allowed. So like it is a really good matchup. But if he's going to be the highest owned on the slate, then I think it's just logical. I mean, because Tampa Bay has been really bad against tight ends this year too. So Zach Ertz, I think, makes a lot of sense. He's a safe play as well. Like, I don't know. Like, I know a couple weeks ago he put up that 25 burger. Like, I don't think that is something that I would expect, but he's been a pretty safe play for the most part this year, getting you, 14, 15 DK points. And on a slate without like I think really just high end tight ends. Like there's not obviously like a Brock Bowers or somebody like that or Trey McBride where these guys can go out and put up 25. Like there's not a lot of that on this slate. So I definitely think that you can look at Zach Ertz is definitely a play. I think actually Dallas Goedert. He came back last week. Looked really good. Last week saw 6 targets, 4 catches, 55 yards. Obviously that was without the starters playing, but I think he's somebody that can get you there as well. He's only $3,900, and so I like him as a play. And then Dalton Schultz, I don't mind him either at 3,600.
Yeah, Schultz is definitely somebody I have interest in. If I'm going to be playing this CJ Stroud team, that's definitely going to make me sick to my stomach, probably all the way through the first game on Saturday. But yeah, I think he makes a ton of sense without the guys that they're with the guys that they're missing, and he's only 3,600. But yeah, it's going to be hard to get off of a guy like Likely at his price. He just does so much for your lineups, and should definitely have a profile there that looks good. Yeah, I guess TJ Hawkinson too at the top is somebody I know we touched on, but I didn't, and it makes sense at 4,200. Like I could see myself getting to him in some minis as well. Let's talk about defense, guys, and we can, build our lineup and wrap it up for the people. Defense, we got 3,700 at the top for the Ravens, and you go all the way down 2,200 for the Steelers. But this is a, very fun spot because we do have a lot of, I guess a lot of game totals or a lot of games that we expect to see scoring. And then you have Baltimore, who's 3,700. Like it's going to be tough to find salary to get up to them this week, but the Steelers have just been so inept when it comes to putting up points of any measure. Russell's been turning it over. This defense has been great. So you hope you don't get a pick six as we saw when these two teams faced earlier this year, because Baltimore could just really wreck. But Steelers have the opportunity to take advantage of some things as well too. I get it. Like the Ravens are implied for so many points, but if they can stall some drives and they have it's hard to say they have the personnel to contain Lamar, so to speak, but they could garner a couple sacks in this game. So I find them interesting. I think the Rams Vikings have the late slate defense is an interesting way to attack it from that approach of the late slate hammer, where you just root for that game to be under. And you got Sam Darnold, and then you got Stafford, who's been struggling, right, to make any plays. So at 3,000 and 2,900, I think both of those defenses are in play for me. But Maddie, what are you seeing at defense, and how do you want to attack it?
Yeah, I really like the Vikings a lot. I mean, they get a lot of pressure on the quarterback. They blitz a ton. And Stafford and that offense has not been good recently. And it's, with the whole fires out in LA thing, this game's being played in Arizona now, which, how much of a home game is it for the Rams anymore? Right. So does it become more neutral site, or is it still a home game? That's just going to be I think a different environment than what it would have been. So
I think it's going to be a home game for the Vikings. The Vikings travel really well. They're one of the teams that really travel really well.
And people from LA right now are not worried about going to a football game.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, those games are already usually pretty split because there's not a heavy Rams fandom. And so I expect this game to be a very heavy, look like a Vikings home game.
Yeah. So I like the Vikings defense personally.
Yeah. Like it. Kev, how about you?
Yeah, I think I would throw the Texans in there as well. They blitz at a really high rate. I don't mind them either at $2,700.
Yeah, and an interesting way to attack the slate is you get the defense on the board first, and it could be you could be looking at only 3 or 5 points, or if they get a touchdown or they go crazy early, then you don't have to worry about defense yet for the rest of the slate. So always an interesting approach to take the first defense, or to take a defense from the first game there, which is always fun. All right, boys, let's build the team and get out for the people. This is the DJ Nation podcast, guys, powered by the Fantasy Authority. Appreciate you guys rocking along with us. We're going to build this team for the wildcard slate and get you guys out of here so that you guys can build your teams, rest up, and be able to catch a fun slate of football that's going to be on tap for all this weekend. Maddie, start it off for us. How you feeling?
I'll just make the easy, obvious play. Let's play Bucky.
Kev, you want it or you want me to go?
Let's go Jaden Daniels.
Let's go McLaurin.
Ertz.
Nico.
Let's go Steelers D for right now, just to free up some salary. Got 4,900 left for running back, wide receiver, and flex.
Disley.
All right, that gives us 5,650 for running back, wide receiver. Which one you want, Kev?
That's tough. I was.
We go Cup and Akers for the mini stack.
I was going to do Kyron.
Kyron? All right.
3-9's fine.
Yeah, 3-9. Let's go. Wide receiver.
Probably Aguilar, I guess.
Do I do it, boys? Do we play Mac Daddy?
Mac Hollins?
Sure. I'm cool with that.
I mean,
a little Buffalo exposure.
Ball's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. With everybody back. I mean, I think even Curtis Samuel's back. Like, I think
Curtis Samuel is back. I mean, at this point, like, it's a crapshoot no matter who you pick at 3,800. So we might as well get exposure to a high profile offense. I mean, we didn't talk about him, but if I
came off Nico pick and went to Deontay Johnson, we could put Justin Jefferson in there. A little mini stack of just Jefferson and Kyron. Who wanted? I don't know. Don't want it out there. Whatever you guys want to do. We can keep Nico.
Maddie?
I would keep Nico personally.
Yeah.
All right, we're going back Hollins then. Or we could go
you could play Shepard or Aguilar.
I was gonna say we could go Aguilar, fuck. That fucking guy. Hold on, let me put Nico back in.
Or even Naylor.
No, this is what we do. We go
Naylor's probably the best.
What's his price?
36.
Let's go Curtis Samuel, Vikings.
All right. Yeah, that works.
I mean, it's essentially the same thing of Mac and Steelers. Just get a better defense, and you're still banking on the same thing with that
wide
receiver spot.
Yeah. No, I'm good with that.
All right. So the team this is all the salary. Not something we normally do, but we did this week. Team is Jaden Daniels, Bucky Irvin, Kyron Williams, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Nico Collins, Will Disley. Will Disley in the tight end spot because he plays first. Double tight end with Zach Ertz in the flex, and then Vikings defense for $3K. Kind of gives you some flexibility there as well too to be able to make pivots with your lineup depending on how things do. I mean, if Collins and Disley are smashing early, you kind of have a lot of flexibility to be able to move some things around. So feel good about that. And feel good about how we talked about the slate, boys. This is a fun one, under an hour 45. So that's always good for the people. Good for Maddie on the East Coast there, who stays up late anyway. So it's all good. Fellas, wildcard slate in the books. Any final words for the people?
No, I think this is, one of the unique years where I think we're going to see some underdogs win. I don't think there's a clear, like really good team like we've had over the last couple of years.
Imagine the Steelers and Broncos, just each one.
Possible.
Hey, that'd be crazy. Who is the we had somebody talk about Mike Tomlin on the hot seat, but like Harbaugh's not able to get it done again. Like, whew, I don't know what they're going to be saying.
Yeah, I mean that's a third freaking division game there. Steelers,
Steelers. What's your guys' Super Bowl prediction? Just like who's going?
I have the Chiefs making it again.
Nah, I don't think they squeak by again. Sorry, Kev.
Who do you think they're playing in the AFC Championship?
I think it's Baltimore or Buffalo. Baltimore's defense has been. If you asked me earlier in the year, I would have said it'd be Buffalo, but Baltimore's defense has been playing really well over the last few weeks, and their offense is just disgusting. I think they need to get Zay Flowers back first to make a run. But if they're fully healthy, I would go Baltimore. If they're not, I'll side with Buffalo.
Anybody but the Chiefs, huh?
The Chiefs are fine, especially with Hollywood Brown being on the team now. It's opened up their offense more. It's allowed Xavier Worthy to actually do what he and not be the focal point of the defense.
And Diop will he'll be playing 100% of the snaps now.
Yeah. So, the Chiefs they're fine. I just don't think they are. It's all their games this year have been lower scoring. They rely on their defense. They, take care of the ball. Yeah, it's just not the Chiefs offense we're used to where they hang 30 every week.
Well, they weren't last year either.
They're missing Rashee Rice and could potentially be going back to the promised land again. It's just absolutely insane. I actually think that if I were in the Chiefs room, which I don't get paid to be there, and I'm not there, but I would be wanting to play Buffalo over Baltimore, to be honest. Like I would welcome the Bills.
I don't know. Buffalo was their only loss this year. The Buffalo's been the Chiefs' only loss. Chiefs have lost to the Bills in the regular season like 3 or 4 straight years, but the Chiefs have also beat them 3 straight years in the playoffs. So, I think I would rather see Baltimore than I'd rather want to see.
I wouldn't want to play Buffalo.
Ooh, I don't know if I'm worried.
But I will say that something the Chiefs are going to be like fully healthy that we haven't seen all year. Like even because like Jalen Watson, who for the first 7 weeks, like the Chiefs defense was elite. Like once he went out, the defense really took a pretty big hit. Like he's back, like he has been activated. He's practicing back again with them, so they're gonna have him back. You already mentioned Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins. Like this team is going to be the best we've seen them all year, and so they've just been waiting for this point. Like this is what they do. They lip to the playoffs because they don't give a shit about anything else. And then once they get to the playoffs, they turn it on. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens because it's not crazy to say like the Broncos could go and knock off the Bills. Do I expect it to happen? No. But like if it happened, would I be like no? Do I think the Steelers are going to beat the Ravens? Absolutely not. Like I would be shocked if the Ravens lost to the Steelers. Like I just think the Steelers are not that good. Like I think they're pretty bad. And so like I think on the NFC side, I think I would still go to the Lions. I think they're just the best team overall. Like what they've been able to do this year, they've overcome everything. Their defense started to look better again. They're gonna have home field advantage. I think it's the Lions, and I think in the AFC side, I think it's either the Chiefs or the Bills. But I would go Chiefs, obviously. But
yeah, see, I think the NFC has been more of a wild card personally. But
I don't know. Like this just feels like the Lions are kind of that team that's like on that.
They do feel destined. Yeah. I mean they do.
Like they were so close last year. They almost got there. This year they've went through all this injuries and everything else, and they've still have come out on the other side. I mean they were dominant against the Vikings. On that Sunday night game where like I was not expecting it to be like that. Like they just made them their bitch. And there's this outside chance they get Aiden Hutchinson back. Getting Anzalone back was huge. Carlton Davis, I think, should be back for their game one. David Montgomery should be back for that game. So they're going to get some of those pieces back for that run. And like, I don't know, like I just don't think the NFC is like that great. I think it's more of like a little bit of smoke and mirrors here with that division. Like I think the AFC is head and shoulders better than the NFC is. And like the Eagles are the only team that I think that could get in their way.
I don't know. I kind of like the Rams. I think the Rams knock off the Vikings this week.
I have a future on the Rams.
Yeah, I think that's possible too, but I just don't see the Lions losing.
I don't think Tampa Bay's defense is good enough. I don't think Washington's a complete enough team either. Packers, no. I think they're worse than both the Vikings and the Lions. Yeah,
that's why I think we're destined.
I think the Eagles match up extremely well, especially on defense with what the Lions do offensively. Yeah. Like the interior of that Eagles defense with like Bond playing linebacker and Cooper DeJean playing slot, like they have shut down everybody, and so like that takes care of the running game and Amon-Ra right there. So I would probably go with the Eagles coming out of the NFC.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun though. For the championship round weekend,
Eagles Ravens will be the two seeds.
Yeah,
or 2 versus 3.
Oh my god, that would be those two fan bases in the Super Bowl. That would be
that would be nuts.
Wild. East Coast would be live. I actually have a future on the Rams, Maddie, so I would not hate that at all. I think it'll be tough sledding for them, but I mean they do have kind of
they've got Stafford, right? Like Stafford's been there.
Yeah, they got a proven quarterback. They got a good coach, and that's kind of what you want. And they've kind of they got into the division win, I think, which is a huge step for them. So it's unfortunate what's going on in LA because we don't know what the status of them playing home games is necessarily going to be. So I don't know how much that'll factor in. But like Kev said, like the home crowd, so to speak, isn't necessarily like LA already. So it'll be fun. I mean, if we can somehow get Rams playing the Lions, to go to the Super Bowl, I mean, how incredible would that be from a narrative standpoint? That would just be phenomenal. But yeah, I think the Chiefs definitely go back. I think the Lions are, I think they are the team that you got to put up 30 against this team in order to want to make it. Their Achilles heel is their defense though. So we'll see what happens, but yeah, should be a fun playoffs. I love doing it every year. I'm excited, excited to see who comes out on top. It's always fun. So we'll be talking about it. We'll be talking about it, and then we hope to be talking about it with you guys too, who's still been listening to our diatribe on who's going to be playing in the Super Bowl for playoffs. But any more discourse you want on that, hit up the Discord. Link is in the description on YouTube, but you can always hit us up individually on Twitter, and we'll be sure to hook you guys up. Thanks for everybody who was rocking along with us here on a Friday night. Late as always. We got to start calling this, the DJ Nation After Dark show.
Yeah, really.
The way we're going. As I see the bags under Maddie's eyes filling up. But it's always fun to be able to chat it up with you guys. And like I said, we'll be back for every round of the playoffs to be able to chop it up with you guys. And we love to do so. So shout out to everybody. DJ Nation fam, you guys go out there, get that money. You know how we do it. Signing off for Matty D at Matty DFS is where you can find him on Twitter and X. Signing off for the Godfather himself, Kevin Steele at Fantasy Route 13 is where you can find him on Twitter and X, and myself, Ryan Williams at Ryan Alexander _W. We'll catch you guys next week. Until then, get that money. Peace.